Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from the Federalist dated November 7th. It's kind of going to be a long one. This is a 10-minute read, and with additional commentary, it's probably going to be more than 10 minutes, just letting you know that ahead of time. It says, Trump is not to blame for Democrats electing violent extremists. And this video is coming on the heels of the elections. From the time you're listening to this, it would have been last Tuesday. And, Virginia electing a guy that said he wanted to murder, death, kill a bunch of conservatives just because they were conservative. So let's go ahead and get into this. It says, Democrats have a long history of defending and electing party leaders engaged in the worst behavior imaginable, while Republican voters are still rejecting extremists. And you find that out pretty quickly, especially if you could see things like in the Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes interview that happened. From the time you're listening to this, again, it would have been like at least a week and a half beforehand. Where people are denouncing Tucker Carlson. He shouldn't be canceled, but they're denouncing him for it. Whereas people on the left, they have people that are like, hey, let's go. And same thing with like guys like Hassan Piker say that they want to murder, death, kill Republicans or people on the right, and just nobody on the left seems to want to call them out for it. So let's get into it. It says, while liberal America is justifiably triumphant about Tuesday night's election results, a lot of professionals are quietly worried about extremism infecting the party. They're being very quiet about it because I haven't seen a thing about any of them saying it. So certainly, electing a mayor of New York who's an unfortunate hellbroth of communism, Islamism, and defund the police is not someone you want defining your party nationally. Yeah, good luck, New York. It's been nice knowing you. Says, and then there's the problem of Jay Jones, who was the guy I was referring to earlier, the Attorney General-elect of Virginia, who won handily despite being caught sending text messages wishing death on a Republican colleague's kids, and this wasn't some flippant message. After he did this, he called up his colleague on the phone to further argue his point about needing to watch kids die in order to make political progress. He also appears to have deceived the state and faked community service hours as part of a punishment for being caught driving 116 miles an hour. Why in God's name you need to be driving 116 miles an hour unless it's a life and death situation, I don't know. And from what I've seen, that was not a life and death situation. Anywho, says, despite this, no notable national Democrat called for Jones to withdraw from the race. Virginia gubernatorial candidate Abigail Spanberger refused to withdraw her endorsement of Jones, and Virginia Senator and former vice presidential candidate Tim Kaine also continued to support him. Further, Northern Virginia, where the bulk of the state's votes are, it says, is comprised of the Washington, D.C. suburbs. It's perhaps the most politically attuned area of the country, so it's nearly impossible to make the case that voters are somehow unaware of Jones's conduct. Jones was also running against a moderate incumbent Hispanic Republican whose tenure in office was scandal-free, so voters really had no excuse to justify voting for Jones. And the author says that he lives in Northern Virginia, and much to his own discomfort, there's no way to get around the fact Jones owes his victory to a bunch of my liberal neighbors deciding in the middle of a government shutdown triggered by congressional Democrats that they're fine with wishing death on children if it helps protect the cushy federal jobs and lucrative government contracts that make Northern Virginia one of the wealthiest areas of the country. So how did we get here? Well, the professional political class has fallen back on the obvious all-purpose explanation because forever and always the problem is Donald Trump, because everything is Trump's fault, isn't it? 1 + 1 suddenly equals potato, and it's Donald Trump's fault. Says Trey Easton of the Searchlight Institute, which I've never heard of until that sentence right there. And he wrote, I don't think Virginia Dems should seek Jay Jones's resignation. Voters were fully aware of the facts and elected him. I don't think you're about to see a bunch of Dems doing and saying stupid shit because they can. I do think that thanks to Trump, the bar for disqualifying behavior is now in hell. Yes, because Trump did all these things that he actually didn't do because you guys made a bunch of crap up. Okay. But this guy has actual text messages where you can see him threatening to kill children, and no, that's totally cool. So back to the article. It says, with due respect, Easton is simply wrong on one point. Everywhere you look, you see Democrats doing and saying stupid stuff just because they're angry and feel empowered to do so, and to some extent they are being rewarded for being splenetic and extreme. I have to look up what that word splenetic means. Something with the spleen, obviously. I think I have an idea what it means, but I think I'm going to check that out later. Anyway, it says, for instance, meet the brand new governor of, and I can never pronounce this right, and I've seen this town name a lot of times, so apologies for my French being horrible and basically non-existent. Was it Coeur d'Alene or something? But whatever. It says Idaho, so sorry about that. Say this brand new mayor who thinks Christian conservatives are mindless cult member morons. They are white racist supremacists. They can F themselves and go to hell. So this guy's, this is the actual example of bigotry people need. Like, this is an actual bigot, okay? He doesn't know anything about what he's talking about, but he feels empowered to say, oh no, all these people are bad because I just don't agree with them politically. And for the people that voted for him, well, shame on you. It says, and I assure you that if you want to go poking around, this guy and his sentiments are not unique. Unfortunately, that's in all likelihood correct. And he says, but I don't want to beat up too much on Easton because the Searchlight Institute, founded by Adam Gentleson, a former aide to Democratic Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, is ostensibly a moderating force pushing back on this nonsense. According to Searchlight's mission statement, they want to build a supermajority around liberal ideas because at the present moment, liberalism is too insular. It says, instead of building new coalitions and ushering in a realignment, we built a system that enforces purity and shrinks our tent. Per the Idaho example above, I presume Searchlight understands that if they want Democrats to make inroads into conservative electorates, you can't be electing Democrats at the local level in places such as Idaho who are saying things that make them instantly unpalatable to the broader state electorate. If Searchlight is serious about this mission, they need to recognize that this is a problem intrinsic to the Democrat Party and deal with that directly. So basically saying to police themselves, which they are obviously not doing, to the extent that this extremism is said to be a reaction to Donald Trump, this is the result of an elaborate mythology that is often repeated but doesn't align with basic facts. Precisely. It says, to start, Donald Trump hasn't meaningfully radicalized the Republican electorate, much less made them overtly hostile to Democrats the same way the Democrats now speak with poisonous contempt about their fellow citizens who vote differently. And the idea that Trump is responsible for the fact responsible for the fact that there's like words missing from this article. It's getting kind of annoying. So we'll start that again. It says the idea that Trump is responsible for the fact that the bar for disqualifying behavior is now in hell is simply not true. Last year, it was revealed that North Carolina gubernatorial candidate Mark Robinson had said a bunch of weird sex and race stuff on dodgy internet forums years before he entered public life. It was ugly stuff, but certainly less disqualifying than being a current member of the Virginia legislature and wishing death on your colleagues' children. I would absolutely agree with that. As the result in North Carolina was that Robinson ran 11 points behind Trump, who won the state in the presidential election and lost his election by 14 points. A significant portion of the Republican electorate simply refused to vote for Robinson. To cite another Trump-era example, there was the famous 2017 Roy Moore Senate race in Alabama. I remember hearing about this, and that was before I really got involved in looking into political stuff. So let's see if this refreshes my memory here. It says Moore had a history of controversy to begin with, and after securing the Republican nomination for the state's open Senate seat, the Washington Post published a story detailing how Moore had allegedly pursued a relationship with teenage girls in his 30s and that there were allegations of that type of assault that you can see right there that YouTube doesn't like me saying. And yes, that's a very bad thing. In spite of Trump endorsing Moore, heavily Republican Alabama, where it's common for Republicans to win statewide by 10 or more points, elected Democrat Doug Jones to the Senate. Now you could lament the level of partisanship that still exists when a candidate is engaged in egregious behavior, but it's simply not true that the bar for disqualifying behavior is in hell, at least as far as Republican electorates are concerned. As the obvious retort at this point from Democrats is, okay, fine, but how do you explain that Republicans repeatedly voted for someone as manifestly unqualified and immoral as Donald Trump? I'd like you to say, unqualified, you could probably have argued that for his first term, though he was a super successful businessman, and he kind of approached, it seemed, running the government like a business, so that's not really, I wouldn't say it's necessarily that unqualified. He's also been like a public figure for his entire life, or entire adult life, I should say, and immoral, it's because you guys keep making stuff up about him. He's not immoral. And to that, I would tell earnest Democrats that I am once again begging them to honestly evaluate Donald Trump relative to other Democrat candidates. While initially it may have seemed shocking that Trump was involved in unseemly petty scams such as Trump University and caught on tape talking about grabbing other women by their nether regions, okay, though that's fair, Democrats were never honest about the fact that their candidate Hillary Clinton had decades of public scandals that were in many respects far more troubling than anything Trump had mixed up in, effectively blunting any outrage that might have otherwise stirred the electorate. After spending decades aggressively defending her husband's legendary infidelity, which involved gross behavior such as basically using state troopers as pimps, unwantedly exposing himself to women, and sexually exploiting White House interns and lying about it, why would you expect the voting public to be upset by a thrice-married playboy's behavior and think that Hillary Clinton has any moral authority to portray Trump as some misogynist sex fiend? Similar gross behavior has been aggressively defended, excused, and normalized by the Democrat Party and the media many years before Trump emerged on the political scene. And it was all done very transparently to justify the wielding of naked power. Recall in the middle of the Lewinsky scandal, a Time magazine writer even offered to sexually service Bill Clinton to protect abortion rights. I did not know that, and that's pretty shady. Hopefully that person got fired for that. It says, and if you're wondering why conservatives have never bought the accusations that Clarence Thomas was a sex pest, it might have something to do with the fact that Thomas's accuser, Anita Hill, just a few years after testifying against Thomas, went on Meet the Press at the height of Bill Clinton's sex scandal, defended him, and completely reversed herself on the notion that being sexually inappropriate in the workplace was disqualifying for high office. So yeah, of course it was a bunch of BS, and oh, by the way, the person that was attacking Clarence Thomas the most was someone named Joe Biden. You may have heard of him. As for the notion that Trump was involved in petty scams and shady business deals, once again, he was running against Hillary Clinton, who had graduated from obviously corrupt land deals back in Arkansas to starting the Clinton Foundation, which was little more than a 9-figure shakedown operation designed to further Hillary's ambitions. Trump University, his various bankruptcies, and iffy real estate deals just didn't seem to be troubling alongside the Clintons' blatant corruption. And let's not pretend that Saint Obama was above engaging in some very naked graft for his own personal benefit, hosting fundraisers from mobbed-up bankers, choosing to align with anti-Semites over his own girlfriend, and palling around with violent domestic terrorists to launch his political career. And by the way, all this stuff with these examples, you can click on the article below or link it or copy and paste it in your web browser, and then you can see the links on the page for yourself and view all these things. Continuing on, it says, and then there's the fact that after years of investigating and attacking Trump over false accusations, the entire establishment once again lied through their teeth about Joe Biden being directly involved in foreign corruption with his crackhead son, who was exploiting his dad's position to get millions from Moscow politicians and strike lucrative deals with communist China. If you want to go further back than the last few elections, remember that Democrats never distanced themselves from Ted Kennedy, whose horrific behavior continued well after killing a woman in Chappaquiddick. Which, by the way, the Chappaquiddick movie, which is called Chappaquiddick, is actually very, very, very good. So, again, if you're looking for like a, just a drama, political intrigue type movie to watch, there you go. When Obama was elected, there was still a former exalted Cyclops in the Ku Klux Klan serving as a Senate Democrat. Despite Robert Byrd's reported change of heart on matters of race, something tells me this would have not been tolerated if an elected Republican had this skeleton in his closet. And by the way, Robert Byrd is someone that Joe Biden looked to as a mentor. Okay? Just letting you know that. Says you could certainly argue Trump is immoral and corrupt, but there is simply no argument that before or after Trump, Democrats ever cared about immorality and corruption in their own ranks enough to be shocked by anything Donald Trump ever did, much less that they hold themselves to a higher standard. And the author says he's more sympathetic to the idea that Trump might be responsible for coarsening the debate, but even then, it seems to me, that again the author, that wishing death on kids and calling everyone you disagree with racist, which has been fairly commonplace Democrat rhetoric for several years now, I'd say probably a decade, really, represent a significant escalation over and above Trump's insults and name-calling, which, while perhaps not always a justifiable excuse for being mean, are often tempered with obvious humor. Finally, I would note that the election of Jay Jones came less than 2 months after the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk, which is part of a larger rise in left-wing violence. The American right certainly has its own issues, but it is at least debating those problems. Right now, a debate about how to handle anti-Semitism is consuming conservative intelligentsia, a debate that is increasingly settled in the Democrat Party in favor of being pro-terror groups such as Hamas. And the author says he doubts that he agrees with the Searchlight Institute on much in terms of policy, but for the sake of the country, he generally shares their goal of dragging the Democrat Party back to the center, which would be a good thing for everybody. It says, but in order to do that, you need to be realistic about the party's problems and acknowledge that Donald Trump, as he exists in reality, is not the reason the Democrats are increasingly accepting of extremism and violence. There's a concerted effort on the left to portray Trump, who has, if anything, made the Republican Party more liberal, as more extreme than he is, and turn him into a mythic, fascist villain to justify dark desires of inflicting literal pain on the political opposition. And whatever problems Republicans have with terminally online extremism in their own coalition, so far there's little evidence these problems have spilled into the broader electorate the way they have with Democrats. And that is the end. It's a long one here. I mean, we've been here recording for just about 15 minutes now. But yeah, so it's just a good article that gave a bunch of examples of the the Democrats having some worse problems than Donald Trump, or just they don't seem to be policing their extremists in their own party the way Republicans are telling their extremists, like, get the hell out, we want nothing to do with you. So do you agree with this? Do you not? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.